town celebrated when he pinned on the badge. Mothers felt safe letting their children play in the streets. Store owners stopped sleeping with loaded shotguns under their beds. The era of lawlessness was finally over. Clayton Dockery had arrived, and Silver Ridge, Arizona territory would never be the same. They were right about that last part, but not in the way they imagined. Because while the townsfolk slept peacefully at night, their protector was out in the darkness, hunting. Not for criminals, for victims. What happens when the man you trust with your life is the one planning to take it? What happens when justice itself becomes the mask for murder? This is the story of the deadliest lawman in the American West. A man who wore a star on his chest while carving a path of death across 4 territories. And the most terrifying part? Nobody suspected a thing. Not until it was far too late. They say absolute power corrupts absolutely. But what if the corrupt seek power first, knowing exactly what they plan to do with it? Picture Arizona territory in 1883. Silver Ridge wasn't much to look at. Maybe 200 permanent residents, wooden buildings weathered gray by desert wind, a main street that turned to soup when it rained. But the silver mines nearby? Those made Silver Ridge matter. Prospectors flooded in weekly, their pockets heavy with dreams and occasionally with actual money. The railroad was coming through next year, which meant land speculation, investment, opportunities, and an influx of people carrying wealth they couldn't protect. It also meant chaos. By early 1883, Silver Ridge had earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous towns in the territory. 3 saloons operated 24 hours. Claim disputes regularly ended in gunfire. A man named Jim Tolbert had been running things, but calling him a sheriff was generous. He was more of a local thug who broke up fights he didn't start himself. The town council, such as it was, decided they needed real law enforcement before the railroad companies refused to root through. That's when they found Clayton Dockery. On paper, he was perfect. Civil War veteran who'd fought with distinction in multiple campaigns, cool under pressure, had served as sheriff in 3 previous towns: Socorro, New Mexico Territory, Prescott, Arizona Territory, and briefly in Yuma. References checked out. The man who interviewed him, Council Chairman Robert Davies, later wrote in his diary, "Met with Dockery today. A harder man I've never encountered, but that's precisely what we need. His eyes are like winter frost, but his handshake is firm and his words seem solid." Clayton Dockery was 41 years old when he arrived in Silver Ridge in April 1883. He stood 6 feet tall, which was considerably above average for the era. He had pale blue eyes that rarely blinked, a thick mustache the color of iron, and hands that showed no tremor even when drawing his revolver. A Colt Peacemaker he kept, immaculately maintained. He wore his badge polished so bright you could see your reflection in it. Within his first week, Dockery did exactly what the town hired him to do. He walked into all 3 saloons and laid down new rules. No shooting inside town limits, no brawling that spilled into the streets, and any man causing trouble would spend 3 days in a cell with nothing but water and stale bread. To prove he meant business, he personally disarmed a drunk miner who'd been terrorizing the general store and dragged him to jail so efficiently that witnesses said the miner barely touched the ground. The town loved him instantly. Here was order. Here was safety. Here was a man who didn't play games with troublemakers. Crime rates dropped immediately, or at least reported crime dropped. Bar fights decreased. Claim disputes got resolved through the proper channels instead of with bullets. Women and children walked the streets in the evening without fear. Silver Ridge was transforming, just like those 3 previous towns had transformed under Sheriff Dockery's watch. But there was something else happening too. Something nobody was connecting. Because in a town full of transients, drifters, and fortune seekers, it's easy for people to disappear. And disappearances had started. It began subtly. A gambler named Thomas Whitmore had been winning heavily at the Silver Nugget Saloon for 3 straight nights. He'd turned $40 into nearly $600, a fortune in 1883. Witnesses remembered him bragging loudly about his plans to head to San Francisco and open his own gambling hall. "I'll be swimming in money by Christmas," he told anyone who'd listen. Thomas Whitmore left the saloon on the night of May 12, 1883. He never made it to his boarding house. His body was found 4 days later by a rancher checking his property line, about 3 miles outside town. Single gunshot wound to the back of the head, execution style. His pockets were empty. His money belt, which the saloon owner confirmed he'd been wearing, was gone. Sheriff Dockery investigated personally. He interviewed everyone at the saloon, documented the scene, filed a detailed report concluding it was likely a robbery by person or persons unknown, probably drifters who'd left the territory. Case closed. Unsolved. The town mourned briefly and moved on. Then it happened again. Jacob Hendricks, a prospector who'd struck a decent vein of silver, came to town in June to register his claim and purchase supplies. He made the mistake of paying for everything with gold coins, showing off his success. He was found in an alley behind the assayer's office 3 days later, shot once through the head. Money gone. Sheriff Dockery investigated, filed a report. No suspects. Case closed. Then a ranch hand named Billy Cordova disappeared after winning heavily at cards. Then a traveling merchant. Then a man who'd sold his claim for cash and couldn't keep quiet about it. Always the same pattern. Victims with known wealth found days later in remote locations if they were found at all. Shot execution style, completely cleaned out. And always investigated thoroughly by Sheriff Clayton Dockery, who seemed genuinely frustrated by his inability to catch the perpetrator. But there was someone who was starting to notice a pattern. Morris Blackwood was Silver Ridge's undertaker, a quiet man with gentle hands and observant eyes. His job required attention to detail, preparing bodies, noting causes of death, keeping records. By August 1883, Morris had handled 6 bodies from these mysterious robberies and killings. He didn't talk about it much, but he'd started keeping his own private notes, because every single bullet wound looked identical. Same angle of entry, slightly downward, suggesting the shooter was taller than average. Same close-range powder burns indicating the victim was shot at point-blank range, probably while kneeling or on the ground. Same precise placement that spoke of professional execution, not panicked robbery. Morris wasn't a forensic expert. The field barely existed in 1883, but he'd prepared enough bodies in his career to recognize patterns. These weren't the chaotic, desperate killings of common thieves. These were methodical, professional, cold. He considered taking his observations to Sheriff Dockery but hesitated. After all, what was he going to say? That the bullet wounds looked similar? Dockery was already investigating these cases harder than anyone. If there was evidence to find, surely the sheriff would find it. But Morris kept his notes anyway, recording details, making sketches of the wound patterns. The killings continued through the summer and into fall. By September 1883, the count was at 9 unsolved murders, at least 9 that resulted in found bodies. How many men had simply vanished, their bodies never recovered from the vast Arizona desert? The town's initial sense of security was beginning to crack. People stopped flashing their money. Successful prospectors started leaving town in groups rather than alone. The saloons were still busy, but the mood had changed. There was a killer out there, someone skilled and patient, selecting victims with surgical precision. Sheriff Dockery held town meetings, reassuring residents that he was pursuing every lead. He organized volunteer patrols. He sent telegrams to other territories, inquiring about similar crimes. He was doing everything a dedicated lawman should do, and every few weeks another body turned up. But here's what nobody knew, what nobody could have guessed. The reason Sheriff Dockery's investigations never yielded results wasn't because he was incompetent. It was because he was investigating himself, and he was very, very good at it. The beginning of the end came on September 14, 1884, more than a year into Dockery's reign. A traveling merchant named Samuel Brennan rolled into Silver Ridge with a heavily loaded wagon. Brennan dealt in luxury, goods, fine fabrics, quality tools, imported whiskey, catering to the newly wealthy mine owners and land speculators. He was a gregarious man, round-faced and loud, who loved attention almost as much as he loved money, and he had plenty of both. At the Silver Nugget that evening, Brennan bought rounds for the house and made sure everyone knew about the money belt under his vest. 23 ounces of gold coins, he announced, slapping the belt. And that's just spending money. I've got twice. That back in San Francisco. It was exactly the kind of behavior Sheriff Dockery had been warning people against. Several witnesses later recalled Dockery himself approaching Brennan around 9 p.m., speaking to him quietly, gesturing toward the door. They assumed the sheriff was warning the merchant about attracting dangerous attention. That's partially what happened. But Dockery wasn't warning Brennan away from danger. He was luring him directly into it. According to later testimony, Dockery, told Brennan that walking to his hotel alone while intoxicated and carrying gold was suicidal. The sheriff offered personal escort, citing the recent string of robberies. Brennan, drunk and flattered by the attention, agreed immediately. The two men left the saloon together around 9:30 p.m. Several people saw them walking down the darkened main street, Brennan stumbling slightly, Dockery steady beside him. They disappeared into the darkness between street lamps. Only one of them came back. At dawn, a rancher named Dutch McMurray discovered Samuel Brennan's body in a ravine about 2 miles northeast of town. The scene was sickeningly familiar to anyone who'd seen the previous victims. Single gunshot wound to the back of the head, powder burns indicating close range, body positioned face down, all valuables stripped. But this time, something was different, because this time, there'd been a witness. If you love dark, real stories from the Old West, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps a lot. And now, back to the case. 15-year-old Tommy Ortega worked at Anderson's stables on the eastern edge of Silver Ridge. Tommy was a light sleeper, had been ever since his father died when he was 11, leaving him as the man of the house. He'd learned to wake at the slightest unusual sound, always alert to threats. That night, Tommy was sleeping in the stable's hayloft, as he did most nights when his mother worked late shifts at the boarding house. Around 10 p.m., he was jolted awake by voices outside. Two men talking in low tones. One voice was slurred, laughing drunkenly. The other was calm, measured, authoritative. Tommy crept to the loft's window, really just a large gap in the boards where hay was loaded. In the moonlight, he could see two figures near the ravine, maybe 40 yards away. One man was large, stumbling. The other was tall, steady, wearing something that glinted in the moonlight. A badge. "Just need you to kneel down here for a moment, mister." "Brennan," the tall man said. "Thought I saw a snake. Don't want you stepping on it." "A snake? Out here?" Brennan laughed, his words thick. "You're a thorough lawman, Sheriff." The tall man guided Brennan to his knees, positioning him carefully. And then, with no hesitation, no conversation, no warning, he drew his revolver and shot Samuel Brennan in the back of the head. The sound cracked across the desert night. Tommy saw Brennan's body pitch forward, saw the tall man holster his weapon, calmly, methodically, saw him kneel beside the body and begin removing items, the money belt, a pocket watch, rings, anything of value. The sheriff counted coins by moonlight, sorting them efficiently into his own pockets. Tommy didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't make a single sound. He watched Sheriff Clayton Dockery finish his robbery, stand up, brush dirt from his knees, and walk calmly back toward town, whistling softly. The boy remained frozen in the loft for over an hour after Dockery left, terror paralyzing him. When he finally climbed down, his legs barely supported him. He ran home through back alleys, avoiding the main street entirely, and burst into his mother's room at the boarding house, sobbing and shaking. Maria Ortega held her son, listened to his story, and felt her own blood turn to ice. Because what do you do when the law itself is the criminal? Who do you tell when the sheriff is the killer? She made a decision that probably saved both their lives. She told Tommy to stay quiet until she could figure out what to do. The next morning, Dutch McMurray discovered Brennan's body and reported it to Sheriff Dockery. Dockery rode out to investigate, brought the body back to town, interviewed witnesses about Brennan's last night, and filed yet another report about robbery-murder by person or persons unknown. He played his part perfectly, but Maria Ortega had decided to risk everything. She went to Robert Davies, the town council chairman who'd hired Dockery. Davies was a cautious man, a successful merchant who'd built his fortune through careful judgment. When Maria told him what her son had witnessed, he didn't dismiss it. He didn't laugh. He didn't immediately defend the sheriff. Instead, he listened carefully, asked detailed questions, and told Maria to say nothing to anyone else. Then he did something brilliant. He contacted federal authorities, bypassing all local channels entirely. He sent a telegraph to the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson, requesting an urgent and confidential investigation. He didn't mention Dockery by name in the telegram. He was too smart for that, knowing Dockery might have access to telegraph records. He simply requested assistance with urgent matters regarding territorial law enforcement, and while waiting for federal help, Davies started his own quiet investigation. Robert Davies was a businessman, not an investigator. But he understood something crucial. If Clayton Dockery was guilty, there'd be evidence. Men who commit crimes leave traces. The question was where to look. Davies started with finances. He quietly consulted with the town's only banker, swearing him to secrecy. Together, they reviewed Dockery's account. What they found was startling. In the 18 months Dockery had been sheriff of Silver Ridge, on a salary of $60 per month, he'd deposited nearly $2,000 in cash. When confronted, most sheriffs could explain supplemental income, rewards for captured criminals, side work, maybe a small inheritance. But Dockery hadn't claimed any bounties, hadn't worked any other jobs, hadn't mentioned any inheritance. The deposits came in irregular amounts, always in cash, always shortly after one of the unsolved murders. Davies documented everything, matching deposit dates with murder dates, creating a timeline that became more damning with each entry. But he didn't stop there. He sent telegrams to the 3 towns where Dockery had previously served as sheriff, Socorro, Prescott, and Yuma. He asked simple questions. How long had Dockery served? Why had he left? Were there any unusual crimes during his tenure? The responses turned Davies' suspicions into horrified certainty. In Socorro, Dockery had served for 11 months in 1880-1881. During that period, there'd been 7 unsolved murders, all of them robbery murders, all victims killed execution style. The murders stopped completely when Dockery left town. In Prescott, Dockery had served for 14 months in 1881 to 1882. 9 unsolved murders during his tenure, same pattern. The murders stopped when he departed. In Yuma, Dockery had served only 6 months in late 1882. 4 unsolved murders, and again when Dockery left, the murders stopped. The pattern was undeniable. Wherever Clayton Dockery served as sheriff, execution-style robbery murders plagued the town. And wherever he left, the murders ceased entirely. Davies was sitting on evidence that suggested Dockery might be responsible for at least 29 murders across 4 towns, and those were just the cases he knew about, just the bodies that had been found. The actual number could be far higher. When U.S. Marshal William Garrett arrived in Silver Ridge on October 3, 1884, Davies presented everything. Tommy Ortega's eyewitness testimony, the financial records, the correspondence with other towns, the timeline matching deposits to murders. Garrett, a veteran lawman who'd seen the worst of frontier justice, admitted later that his hands shook as he read the reports. They'd all heard stories of corrupt sheriffs, lawmen who took bribes or looked the other way. But a serial killer using his badge as a hunting license? It was almost unthinkable. Marshal Garrett knew he had to move carefully. Dockery was armed, skilled, and dangerous. More importantly, he was popular with most of the town, who still saw him as their protector. If word leaked before they could arrest him, Dockery might flee, or might decide to go down fighting, potentially killing multiple people in the process. Garrett coordinated with the town council, bringing in 2 additional federal deputies from Tucson without explanation. On October 7, 1884, they executed the arrest. They timed it for early morning, catching Dockery in his office before he'd armed himself for the day's patrol. 3 federal marshals entered simultaneously, weapons drawn, before Dockery could react. Clayton Dockery, Marshal Garrett announced, "You're under arrest for the murder of Samuel Brennan and 28 others in 4 territories, while serving as a sworn peace officer. You will be transported to Tucson for federal trial." For the first time since anyone in Silver Ridge had known him, Clayton Dockery's expression changed. The cold, controlled mask slipped. He didn't deny it, didn't protest his innocence, didn't ask what evidence they had. Instead, he smiled. Actually smiled. 29? He said calmly. "Your count's off. Marshal. More like 34 if we're being honest. Though some of those bodies you'll never find, so I suppose they don't count for your paperwork." The marshals froze. Garrett later wrote that the casual way Dockery admitted to 34 murders was more chilling than any violent outburst would have been. This wasn't a man caught in a crime of passion or a desperate criminal cornered by justice. This was a man who'd turned murder into a profession and who seemed almost proud of his efficiency. As they shackled him, Dockery kept talking, almost chatty. "You know what the irony is, Marshal? I'm actually good at being a sheriff. Best you'll find. I kept those towns safe from real criminals. The ones who killed randomly, who hurt women and children, who couldn't control themselves. I had standards. Rules. Rules? Garrett asked, despite himself. Only take the ones who advertise their wealth. Only men traveling alone. Only the ones nobody would seriously miss. Quick kill. Clean job, no suffering. I gave them better deaths than most get out here. Dockery was transported to Tucson for trial. The case attracted national attention. Newspapers from New York to San Francisco covered what they called the badge killer and the death dealer sheriff. Reporters dug into Dockery's past, finding a man who'd seemingly been normal until the Civil War, where something had broken inside him during 4 years of sanctioned killing. He'd learned that murder could be methodical, professional, clean, and after the war he'd looked for a profession that would allow him to continue, with legal protection. His trial began on October 29, 1884, in federal court in Tucson. Tommy Ortega testified, describing what he'd witnessed. The financial records were presented. Representatives from all 4 towns provided evidence of the pattern. The jury deliberated for 18 minutes, guilty on all counts. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Dockery stood and addressed the courtroom with the same cold control he'd always shown. "I regret nothing," he said. "You call me a killer, but look at yourselves. Every man in this room has killed, in war or self-defense, and been praised for it. I simply chose my targets more carefully. The men I killed were fools who couldn't protect their own wealth. Natural selection, gentlemen. I was doing the West a favor." The judge sentenced him to hang. The execution was scheduled for November 2, 1884. They built the Piu gallows in Tucson's Central Plaza. Nearly 2,000 people attended, the largest public execution Arizona Territory had seen. Some came for justice. Some came for spectacle. Many came because they couldn't quite believe that a sheriff, a man sworn to protect and serve, had systematically murdered dozens of people over 5 years while hiding behind his badge. Clayton Dockery walked to the gallows at dawn without restraints. Marshal Garrett granted him that small dignity, and Dockery repaid it. By walking calmly, not attempting escape, he wore the same clothes he'd worn as sheriff minus the badge. When asked for last words, he didn't beg forgiveness, didn't proclaim innocence. Instead, he turned to the crowd and said something that haunted witnesses for years afterward. "You want to know my secret? It's simple. People trust the badge more than they trust their own instincts. Show them a star, and they'll walk into darkness with you willingly. I wore the badge better than any of you ever could because I understood what it really was. A license to hunt. You're all just too timid to use it the same way. Remember my name. Remember that I was right here among you, protecting you, while I killed dozens. And remember that you never suspected a thing." They hanged him at 6:07 a.m. November 2, 1884. His death was quick, but the questions he raised lingered far longer. After Dockery's execution, investigators from multiple territories began reviewing cold cases in every town he'd passed through. The official death toll eventually reached 47 confirmed murders, with another dozen that were likely but couldn't be definitively proven. 47 people who trusted a badge and paid with their lives. The case sparked reforms across the Western Territories. Sheriffs began facing more rigorous background checks. Financial audits became standard. Multiple deputies were required, preventing any single lawman from operating entirely alone. Towns started keeping better records, cross-referencing crimes with law enforcement tenure. But perhaps the most profound impact was psychological. Clayton Dockery had understood something dark about human nature. We want to trust authority. We want to believe the badge represents justice and safety. And when someone wearing that badge asks us to step into the darkness with them, our instincts war with our social conditioning. Usually, the conditioning wins. We trust the star. We follow the lawman. And sometimes that trust is exactly what gets us killed. In the century and a half since Dockery's execution, criminologists have studied his case as an early example of what we now call position of trust serial killers, murderers who use their professional authority to access victims. BTK killer Dennis Rader was a compliance officer. Gerard Schaefer was a deputy sheriff. Golden State killer Joseph DeAngelo was a police officer. They understood what Dockery understood. The badge is both shield and sword. It protects you from suspicion while granting you access to victims who've been conditioned since childhood to trust the law. The Old West was brutal, lawless, and unforgiving, But its greatest horror might not have been the outlaws and desperados everyone feared. It might have been the man wearing a star, smiling, offering to walk you home safely through the dangerous night. How many other Dockeries were there? Across how many other frontier towns? How many murders were filed away as robbery by person or persons unknown, when the person was right there investigating his own crimes, wearing a badge that made him invisible? We'll never know the full count. We can only remember Clayton Dockery's final words, his terrible pride in his efficiency, his belief that he'd been better at wearing the badge precisely because he understood its power not as a symbol of justice, but as a weapon. The badge was supposed to protect them. Instead, it helped select them for slaughter, and that might be the darkest truth of all. If you want more true stories from the darkest corners of the Old West, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, city and country? And don't go anywhere. There's another Old West nightmare waiting for you in the next video.